Hello everybody and welcome to the Whiskey Dictionary. If you found this video because you are looking to fill out your home bar, you are in the exact right place. I'm going to tell you what you do want to buy, what you don't want to buy, and some suggestions for glassware that you might want to consider for cocktails. So I will keep this video as short as I possibly can while still being informative so I don't belabor any other points. To that end, let's talk about the Glencairn. This is the Glencairn whiskey glass. What it is, at least in my opinion, is perfection. You've got the perfect top. What this does is it tapers together, and that helps to concentrate the aroma coming out of the whiskey glass right at the top. You're going to get everything from the alcohol to the actual characteristics of the whiskey, just like the distiller intended. And some people, they don't love that quite as much because the alcohol burn can get to them. But if that's really the case, just add a couple drops of water, you'll be fine. But you'll also kind of get used to it. The bottom part here is bowed out. That gives two purposes. Number one, it gives more surface area to the top of the whiskey if you fill it up properly, so that you get more of the evaporation and more of the aroma out the top. Also, as you're tipping it to drink it, it's going to kind of settle in here and come out slower at the lip. So you're not going to end up with it all over your shirt. And I bring that up on purpose because some of these other glasses do have that problem. These are very inexpensive. They're about $6 a piece. As far as whiskey glasses go, that's inexpensive. And you're going to want to get about a dozen of these, and maybe more depending on how many people you're going to have over. But you're also going to end up getting some branded versions of these as you go to different whiskey events, which if you're watching this, you're getting into whiskey, I guarantee you're going to end up at whiskey events. It's just a hobby that kind of is more fun the more you put into it. So get a bunch of Glencairns. Next, we're going to talk about the Canadian Glencairn. This is a bigger version of the regular Glencairn, and the reason for that is that it's big enough to put an ice cube into. Now the bottom is much bigger, so you're going to get some more of that evaporation, but because the top is flared, they try to make the alcohol, the ethanol, go over the sides. But I will say that the top is too big, and because of that, you lose a lot of the characteristics of the nose. But that might not be what you're doing with this. If you've got an ice cube in here anyway, or a mixed drink, you might not care as much about the nose. So keep that in mind. Personally, I don't think that this is worth getting because I think there's a better option, which I'll be talking about in a minute. So Canadian Glencairn gets a pass. Next, this is the neat glass. This is an interesting thing. This has been making a little bit more of a scene at competitions lately because it does have a much wider base, which allows for more evaporation. The tapered middle here helps to concentrate the nose. The flare ends up getting rid of the alcohol burn on the nose. And then right in the center, you're able to get that concentration of what the alcohol and whiskey actually smells like. I still don't like this one. And the reason for that is that the flared top ends up kind of getting all over you. So if you drink this, it kind of gathers in the middle and then hits this lip and then rushes towards your face. Now, a couple of times I tried to drink out of this thing and both times it happened. Maybe I was drinking a little too quickly, that's fine. And if that was my only qualm with it, I would not say that this was not worth getting. My real qualm with it is even with the competitions, I personally don't get the nose off of this one that I do with the Glencairn. So I just don't see a benefit in this. And I also think it's I think $11 a piece. So for almost twice the price of a Glencairn and really no benefit other than it kind of looks cool, not worth it. So not worth it. Next, we're going to move to the Tribeca. This is very similar to the Glencairn. If you look at the two side by side, there's a very similar concept in mind. This one has the flare at the top, the Tribeca, but it's also much taller. And I would say that this one's not bad. This is a good place to start potentially, but you're not, once again, going to get all of the aromas that you get out of the Glencairn at the top. However, if you are a person who likes to look at the legs of their whiskey, this is a great choice because of the tall walls. You can swirl it, you can look, and you'll see the legs, and they'll just go on. So that is something to consider. Me personally, I'm not going to bother with this one because I already have the Glencairns. You're going to hear that a lot. The Glencairn really is the perfect glass. So let's move on to something that's a little bit more like art. This is the Norlin glass. And if you haven't heard of this one, as you get more into whiskey, you certainly will. This has a couple of cool characteristics to it. The outside is probably about 1/4 of an inch away from the inside. It's a double-walled type of glass. And the inside almost looks like a teardrop just falling down the middle. And the reason for this is that you can hold on this glass and you're not going to warm up your whiskey. Also, obviously, aesthetics matter. Inside, there are these little veins, think like bumps, that help to slosh your whiskey when you're swirling it, and it aerates your whiskey. That is something that is useful, because the more that you aerate your whiskey, the more alcohol evaporates out of it, the more you stir up that nosing characteristics and all of the scents that you can get out of here. And when you smell it, you'll get more out of it, theoretically. Issue here, it doesn't do that. That's what it's supposed to do, but it doesn't do it. And as you nose this, it's got a slight flare at the top. It's supposed to take the alcohol away. The concentration of the whiskey just doesn't really work well there. So I would very much suggest skipping this one. They're $24 a piece, and you have to buy them in a set of 2. So Norlin gets a hard pass from me. All right, next we're gonna go to the Tua glass. This is an Irish whiskey glass. However, you could drink it with whatever you'd like. And specifically, it's designed to be about kind of talking with somebody else and holding it while also, when you're sipping, not really having to look away from them. The long glass, the tall glass, is designed so that you don't have to put your head back quite so much when you're taking a sip. There's also a cool feature on the bottom. It's this little triangle, and you can hold it with your thumb, and that way you don't have to warm up the whiskey. But it also kind of feels nice, honestly. I liked that characteristic of this a lot. One more thing this does, if you want to, you can fill it with whiskey and lay it on its side, and that triangle keeps it on its side. So you can actually essentially aerate or decant your whiskey if you'd like to. Leave it here for a little bit, pick it back up, and you're good to go. I think this one's okay. It was promising when I first got this, and I was expecting it to be just a little bit better than it was. Unfortunately, you're still losing a lot of that nose. The tall bit of the glass, as well as the flared top, does ultimately kind of defeat the purpose. But as far as aesthetics go, I think this is an interesting glass and potentially one you might want to consider. But as far as need, you don't need it. Let's move on to the next one, next 2 that you probably do need. The Tumbler. Now, the Tumbler is an interesting one, and it's very much necessary, honestly. In my opinion, this is one that you have to have in your bar. There's a couple of reasons here. You can either drink out of this neat, you can drink out of this with ice, you could make an old-fashioned in here, you could do all kinds of things. But in general, it's just easy, right? It's not, I mean, let's be honest, the Glencairn is a little pretentious. When you have this, you're doing something. You're smelling, you're sipping, you're thinking. This is sit on your couch and have a whiskey. And that has its purpose. That really does. I think a lot of us are probably in that same camp. So consider getting yourself some tumblers. Honestly, I wouldn't get like a ton of these because you're not gonna have a whole lot of people hanging out. But you know, whatever your typical group of friends are, get one per. And maybe even get something a little bit different just to make it theirs, you know? Get different styles or whatever. All right, let's talk about the shot. You're not gonna take a whole lot of shots if you're really getting heavily into whiskey, but you should have some shot glasses. I'm not gonna spend too much time on that. You should definitely have some shot glasses in your whiskey bar. All right, next one is the Manhattan glass. Now this one is cool. This is kind of a newer style, or I shouldn't say newer, it's not necessarily newer, but you see them a lot more frequently lately in whiskey bars. And the reason is they don't knock over so easy. Old Manhattan style glasses used to have a long stem and then a little base, and they would tip over sometimes, just like a martini. So this is a cool glass. They're not terribly expensive, and personally, I love Manhattans. I think it's one of the better ways to taste a whiskey, unless you are just really trying to nail what the characteristics of that whiskey are. But if you're just trying to enjoy a whiskey, I usually go with either an old-fashioned, neat, or a Manhattan. So you should definitely get some of those in your whiskey bar. And lastly, this is a big, tall glass. It's called a highball glass. And a highball glass, basically a highball is 1 part whiskey and 2 parts something else. And think of it like a Jack and Coke, right? That's technically a highball, although more you're looking at like scotch and soda. And there's all different kinds of combinations that you can do, and you can look them up. A lot of whiskeys, if you buy it and you go to their website, they'll have a version of this. And you should have one of these in your bar, frankly, because you could even use it as a water glass, you could use it as a highball, you could make any kind of mixed drink that you want. Frankly, you could do a mojito in here if you wanted to. So do anything, but basically you got 5 glasses. You got your highball glass, your Manhattan, you got your shot glass, which just, you gotta have it. Shots are fun. You got your tumbler, and you have your Glencairn. You buy any number of these and fill up your bar with it. As far as whiskey goes, you are all set. So I hope you got something out of this video. I hope your bar is awesome, and I hope that you join me here back on the Whiskey Dictionary. Have a great rest of your night. Cheers.